organizations like the Rangers. They were seasoned soldiers, professionals. Basic Special Forces training consisted of months of agonizing physical challenges and special preparations for unconventional and psychological warfare. And counterinsurgency. After World War II, as the Cold War spread its icy fingers across the globe, Army General Robert A. McClure, Chief of Psychological Warfare for the Army, realized that future wars would have to be fought using unconventional means. He proposed the creation of a special force of soldiers. Working in self-contained teams, they would be able to penetrate deep into enemy territory, organize and equip local partisans, and gather crucial information on enemy movements. By 1952, McClure had persuaded the Pentagon that this unusual military capability was needed to ensure the future security of the United States.
General McClure had to embark on a PR campaign, if you will. He sent teams all around the Army units from his office to recruit people for special forces. Well, of course, conventional commanders didn't want to see their best people worn off.
October 12, 1961, proved an important milestone for the Special Forces. President John F. Kennedy visited their headquarters at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He believed in this new type of soldier, even though not all Pentagon officials were convinced. For this occasion, General William P. Yarborough, Special Forces commander, wore what would become the trademark Green Beret. The legacy of the beret can be traced to some of the first Special Forces volunteers who had served during World War II with the OSS, Office of Strategic Services. The OSS, a precursor to the CIA, had sent small teams of operatives to fight behind the lines with the French resistance. Often, these special troops sported the same headgear as their French colleagues. The beret had become a symbol for the esprit de corps that characterized the Special Forces. However, officially, it was a breach of regulations to wear this distinguishing headgear. For most of the military's top brass, it was just too different, and the hat was often relegated to a footlocker. The president's visit would change all that. He felt it set the right tone for the aggressive young unit. The Green Beret officially became part of the Special Forces uniform.
It was something that set you apart above everybody else. I mean, it made you feel special, different, and it called attention to you, and it always reminded you that you should and must conduct yourself in a manner which would only bring credit upon the service and upon Special Forces.
With the Vietnam War, JFK's confidence in this select force was put to the test. Working in teams, the Special Forces would be dispatched to remote regions, live with indigenous populations, learn their ways, and assist them in waging war against communism. In Vietnam, this was called force multiplying.
We're talking about local native soldiers now. We're not talking about professional soldiers. So we were teaching them rudimentary skills and weapons and raids and ambushes and tactics and that sort of thing.
Among those whom the Green Berets trained were the South Vietnamese militia, nicknamed the Rough Puffs, a kind of National Guard. The Special Forces also lived among tribal mountain people, the Montagnards, whose Bronze Age ways had remained unchanged for centuries.
The A detachments had quite a challenge when they went in there, because they were not only training these local communities and local population groups and defending themselves, but they were also conducting medical programs and civic action and psychological warfare, all primarily intended to help secure that population area and deny it to the Viet Cong, the insurgents.
Although the North Vietnamese vied with the U.S. for the Montagnards' loyalty, it was the Special Forces who won the support of these tribal peoples.
To us, coming over, number one, we didn't want to be the ugly Americans. We didn't want to be over imposing. And at the same time, you know, we had a job to do. We had a mission to accomplish.
To gain the allegiance of the locals, the Special Forces soldiers carefully learned ancient customs and studied local dialects, mixed tribal clothing with their own uniforms, and participated in traditional rituals and ceremonies. The local people depended on the Special Forces. In addition to training and equipment, the Green Berets brought an impoverished population food, clothing, and medicine.
Not only were we there to assist them, we were looking for their acceptance of not only our ideals and our philosophy, but of us as individuals.
Once a village was organized, armed, and ready to do battle against the communists, the Special Forces soldiers fanned out to nearby villages to repeat the process.
Being a mobile advisory team, we weren't spending a lot of time in one particular area. We would be moving around and doing things wherever the fires were.
The program paid off. Green Berets were turning the ragtag South Vietnamese militia and Montagnard tribesmen into paramilitary units capable of inflicting terrible damage on enemy forces. But it was across the border in Laos and Cambodia that the Special Forces would face their most deadly challenge. As U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War grew, Special Forces missions took on different roles. The Pentagon kept encountering problems it couldn't solve by conventional means, missions too sensitive to entrust to regular infantry. The only solution was to bring American-led teams into the jungle to observe enemy activity firsthand. The most clandestine of these units was SOG, the Studies and Observations Group.
It was sometime after our initial involvement that it was concluded that we needed to be able to take the war to the enemy. And so the special missions were put together under MAC-SOG, and initially those initials, SOG, stood for Special Operations Group, but for cover purposes it was ultimately called the Studies and Observations Group.
SOG bypassed the usual chain of command, answering directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the White House. Virtually every move they made was classified.
SOG was the first military organization in American history in which not only were its operations covert, but its existence was denied.
As evidence of enemy activity mounted in Laos and Cambodia, SOG was set to launch its first cross-border operation in territory that was supposedly off-limits.
The United States government, in a calculated way, was violating the neutrality, if one wanted to look at it that way, of two countries that supposedly were not involved in the war. And there was a real operational necessity, the protection of 500,000 American lives, to do this.
North Vietnam continued to deny that it had any soldiers in Laos and Cambodia. But the Pentagon estimated that, in fact, tens of thousands of enemy troops were operating from these countries. In the autumn of 1965, Marine and Air Force installations in Da Nang were being pounded by rockets and mortars, and American intelligence officials believed it all originated from across the border. The plan to neutralize this enemy harassment called for SOG teams to be dispatched to a remote landing zone.
Sometimes they were directed to do reconnaissance only and gather intelligence. But most of the time, if they saw an appropriate target, they would attack it.
The recon team consisted of 2 Americans and up to 9 indigenous mercenaries. The Americans supplied advanced technology and sophisticated combat methods. The tribesmen contributed an intimate knowledge of the terrain.
We had a lot more insights than just good training in American Green Berets. We had people who knew the ground and knew the environment. We had people who could take a look at, let's say, a certain way that the enemy marked a trail, and they could tell us this trail is only for troops to march, or there's a base camp nearby. These are kinds of insights that Americans operating purely as an American organic unit could not have brought with them.
The mercenaries were either Cambodians, Vietnamese of Chinese extraction called Nungs, or Montagnards.
Those Montagnards, at a very deep emotional level, had tremendous loyalty. If it was raining at night and you're out there in the jungle without saying a word, one of them would lay close next to you to keep you warm. They would literally die for you.
Every team had an American leader. He was assigned the code number 10. The life of every member of the team was in his hands.
Team leader very quickly begins to think not just of himself, but of the whole team. You are the team, like a mother and her children, and it would hurt you as much if anyone was wounded as if you were wounded. It's one and the same.
The sensitive nature of the mission required that the team go in sterile. This meant wearing nothing that would identify them as Americans. No rank or insignia. Uniforms were Asian-made and untraceable.
A team that goes in, and we ask that it be sterile, does not carry a U.S. weapon for 2 reasons. One, if they have to abandon their weapon, we don't want an American weapon to be in the hands to suggest that there was an American there. The other thing is that if he has to fire his weapon, the American weapons have a distinctive sound. If there's an enemy a few hundred meters away, we don't want him to know that there's an American there, and if you fired an M16, that would give it away.
As a team set off on a mission, they could see mile after mile of uninhabited jungle and wild rivers. Danger was always at hand. The choppers would weave between hazardous cloud banks and try to avoid sporadic 50-millimeter machine gun fire.
The scariest point going into Laos or Cambodia behind enemy lines was the insertion. And it was what we call short final. I'm just watching, waiting for the first bad guy to open fire, and sometimes they did.
You know, you're looking out there and you're trying to look down and trying to see anything that moves. You got 100 pounds of crap on your back. You tumble out into the elephant grass, you don't know if it's 6 feet tall or 10 feet tall, and then you run like crazy.
Once you get off, you can no longer have the option of staying aboard, hollering and pulling out. But on the other hand, this noisy contraption that was telling the whole world, here we come, that's gone. It's quiet again. Your feet are on the ground. You're not dependent on a pilot or door gunners. You're in control again. And you'd relax. And that great fear was gone.
You were pretty much on your own, just you and your guys. So your training had better been, you know, your training and your luck and your karma all had better been working for you that day.
The Green Beret recon teams were left to fend for themselves deep inside hostile territory. To complete their mission, these soldiers would play a most dangerous game of hide-and-seek with their very lives in the balance. A Special Forces recon team on a mission in enemy territory had to be invisible. For 1 week, life was lived in total silence. As much time as the team moved through the underbrush, half as much time was spent still, listening. Walk 20 minutes, halt 10 minutes. Walk 15 minutes, listen for 7.
There are all sorts of things happening out there, and all sorts of noises that are natural, and you have to be able to sort those out from the noises that are made by an enemy. And in those circumstances, any human is generally considered an enemy because we were in areas where there were no friendly forces.
We used to use a term called being good in the woods, which meant this is the kind of person you could drop deep behind enemy lines as a member of a SOG team, and he could almost sense the enemy's presence. He understood very well how the enemy would maneuver. It's like a natural aptitude for how you climb a hill. There's some people that are just good at this sort of thing. The best defensive measure was to stay keenly aware of the presence of the enemy and do whatever we could to bypass him, slip away from him, avoid him seeing you, much less engaging him. And many, many, many times we had situations where teams could have just shot the enemy for the sake of shooting the enemy, but that wasn't our mission. Our mission was gathering intelligence.
One false move, a twig snapping at the wrong moment, could lead to discovery. And once detected, the North Vietnamese forces would pursue the recon team day and night.
When you're being pursued that intensely, it's undoubtedly the way a fox feels in a fox hunt. It's seemingly everywhere you go, you can hear more enemy trying to move ahead of you, sweep you, block you. Enemy purposely making noise to try to force you in a certain direction. It is the most sophisticated and most dangerous kind of a cat and mouse game in the world.
They were trying to drive us to some sort of place where we couldn't get out. You knew what was waiting for you if you were driven to that place. So a lot of our time, once we were compromised, was spent backtracking and trying to destroy our trail, our spoor, you know, just evade.
You resolve yourself, I am not coming out of this sucker alive. Then you can kind of accept it. I wouldn't say it's a cockiness, but it's a kind of calming effect after acceptance. Well, the worst they can do is kill me. That's probably going to happen now. Now I can focus on what it is I have to do. And then you're much better.
A desperate situation called for extreme measures. The solution was the Green Beret Hatchet Force, a 40 to 100-man assault team trained to assist a recon team in trouble.
There they are in the middle of Laos, a million miles from nowhere. The enemy's moving in, and all of a sudden, the Hatchet Force would show up, just like in the movies, banging away and snatch these guys and pull them out.
But sometimes SOG teams, wounded and cornered, would make it to a pickup location, moments away from salvation, only to watch the rescue choppers go down in flames, victims of heavy machine gun fire.
The pilots who pilot those helicopters that are the sitting ducks and the helicopter gunships that are flying in a circle, treetop level, trying to provide suppressing fire are, in my view, unsung heroes.
The team was faced with a terrible choice: either be overrun and captured by the enemy, or call in U.S. air support to bomb the surrounding area.
The team often had to call in very close, to the point where sometimes they received either bomb fragments or, in some cases, splashes in the neighborhood. And some of the recon team leaders are quite cool about calling for this. I was amazed at times when some of them could call in airstrikes on right next to them.
And I'm sure this is true for most of our SOG people, would rather have been killed by our own air than to have fallen in enemy hands alive.
In the ensuing chaos and destruction, rescue helicopters were dispatched to pluck the soldiers from under the noses of the enemy forces. thousands of American lives were being saved by just the 50 or so Special Forces men in Laos and Cambodia.
We were tying down 40,000 to 60,000 North Vietnamese troops, combat troops, that they, had it not been for us, could have sent onto the battlefields of South Vietnam and killed many more Americans. That was a very important role. We realized it. In the end, it was very difficult to stay even overnight. There were so many enemy constantly looking for us. Early on, it was an entire year before we had our first American killed. By 1968, we had 100% casualties. That means every single American leading, participating in cross-border operations was killed, wounded, or missing in action that year.
Surviving one of these recon missions was a feat in itself, requiring far more than skill and motivation. And it was becoming even more difficult for the Green Beret to keep one step ahead of death. As the war escalated, delivering Special Forces soldiers to operations in Cambodia and Laos by helicopter had become far too dangerous.
The enemy tried to cover all their LZs, landing zones, places where helicopters could land in Laos and eastern Cambodia with what we called LZ watchers. These people would have radios or landline telephones. To instant a helicopter arrived to land with a team, they were reporting it.
We had to understand that any field clearing that was good enough for us to use for a landing zone might well be booby-trapped or might have a reception committee. So that when a team landed, within a matter of minutes frequently, that team would be under attack.
An ambush, even by a numerically superior enemy force, was something a recon team trained for.
The reason Special Forces SOG teams usually prevailed in a shootout with North Vietnamese troops was through a basic tactic that they trained on, honed, perfected, called immediate action drills. That is a series of very carefully planned, trained, and executed techniques, responses, little tactics that for about 20 or 30 seconds when you first made contact, you execute with great precision. Every man on the team knows he's going to place fire at a certain place. The radio man's going to get on the radio, call for air instantly. Everybody knows what they're going to do. And you drill it over and over and over again so that when in the jungle you make this contact, you don't have to call an order, you don't have to come up with a plan. It's executed instantly. And with such overwhelming firepower and such shock that it knocks the enemy off balance. And what do? Once you've got them off balance, you turn around and run like hell. And even when you're encountering a force 5, 6, 10 times your own size, being able to knock them off balance for 20, 30 seconds makes a difference between death and survival.
Due to the increasing effectiveness of North Vietnamese countermeasures, it became necessary to find a new means to insert a recon team. By 1970, SOG decided to try the HALO jump. HALO stands for High Altitude, Low Opening. Team members would leap into the pitch-black night from 2 miles up, free-falling for 1.5 miles at 125 miles an hour. Then, at the last possible instant, they would pull the ripcord to open their chutes.
Having the ability to insert with great precision a small team deep behind North Vietnamese lines in the dead of night would make an excellent means of bypassing all these kinds of security the North Vietnamese had laid in place. This was genuinely a world first. There had never before been another parachute team that landed behind enemy lines or anywhere else in combat using a skydiving technique.
Early operations were generally unsuccessful, and there were not many that really did the job and teams came out intact. Well, it was not their lack of planning, it was not the lack of execution by the Air Force that dropped them. It was, in fact, an enemy penetration that caused them to fail.
The effectiveness of enemy spy operations continued to compromise these missions. As a result, halo jumps in Vietnam were short-lived. Still, the concept of the halo jump insertion had been proven. If inserting Special Forces teams behind enemy lines was becoming increasingly difficult, getting them out could be even more dangerous.
If a team was in trouble and couldn't move to an open spot large enough to put a helicopter down, we would have to find a hole in the jungle through which the helicopter crew would drop an 120-foot rope and harness affair called the McGuire rig. And 3 members of the team, they had room for 3 harnesses, would hook themselves into this harness and then hook the 3 harnesses together, and they would be pulled up through the hole in the jungle.
I'm sure a lot of free-spirited people would think of riding strings as kind of an uplifting experience. But the truth is, this is extremely dangerous. We had men killed riding strings, coming out on strings, being shot because they were exposed. A good friend of mine was shot to death on strings. Being dragged through the trees. Another friend was killed being dragged through the trees. These are for extreme circumstances where the alternative is to lose the team to the enemy.
Over time, different rescue methods evolved.
The Air Force had been working to find a means of picking someone up from the ground, and they came up with the Fulton recovery system.
The Fulton recovery system was airdropped to the soldier on the ground. He would don a parka-like harness attached to a self-inflating helium balloon, tethered to a 500-foot-long cord. Then a C-130 airplane would swoop in, hook the balloon's line, and winch him up into the aircraft.
They were reluctant to get involved in picking up live people. They would demonstrate it with dummies. And I said, no, Colonel, you are going to make a pickup, a live pickup, in your airplane before the end of this month. And most important for you to understand is that your rating officer, that is me, will be the first one you pick up.
The Chief SOG was as good as his word, living up to his reputation as the ultimate special operations officer. Colonel John K. Singlaub became a human guinea pig. The system was risky. Singlaub would be accelerated to over 100 miles an hour within a second. If he was unable to clear the nearby treetops, the maneuver could end in death.
After I was picked up, and before I got into the airplane, I suddenly realized that I had forgotten to tell the pilot where to fly. And as I looked down, I realized we were flying over war zone C, fairly low. I mean, we were only about 1,000 feet off the ground, and it would have been an ideal gunnery target to see if you could shoot at that object being dragged behind the airplane.
Throughout the war, all Special Forces soldiers were targets. Often, they had a price on their heads.
There was a price on the head of Special Forces advisors. The local cadre of VC that would be coming to the particular villages and informing them that any cooperation with the American advisors, the Colvans, would subject them to severe punishment, including death to them and their families, and that as an enticement, that if they ensured that an advisor was killed, that they would benefit from it monetarily.
This was the enemy's backyard. They hated the recon teams, and they really hated us. If we were captured, we weren't prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. It meant certain death. And if not death, certainly the worst imprisonment you could think of.
Hundreds of captured American soldiers were languishing in prison camps throughout Vietnam, some for close to a decade. Disillusioned with the war, the American public clamored for something to be done. Son Tay Prison, where over 70 American POWs were held, would become the target of a daring rescue mission. By 1970, U.S. soldiers had been fighting in Vietnam for a decade. Those captured endured a harsh confinement in brutal prisoner-of-war camps, both in North and South Vietnam. But when a POW was taken north, behind enemy lines, he knew there was little hope of escape or rescue. Son Tay Prison was located 23 miles west of Hanoi, the capital of North Vietnam. An estimated 70 American prisoners of war were being held there. The Nixon administration, beleaguered by widespread anti-war sentiments, badly needed some favorable public relations. A rescue mission, a mere stone's throw from Hanoi, fit the criteria. Brigadier General Donald Blackburn was known as the headhunter for his work behind the lines with tribesmen in the Philippines during World War II. Now, he was entrusted with the job of planning this secret prison rescue operation. The mission would be a coordinated effort, including the Air Force, Navy, and the intelligence community. The ground assault teams would be the cream of the Special Forces. They would be led by the legendary Arthur Bull Simons, well known for his World War II exploits.
The Bull said the operation would be relatively hazardous. When it was all over, we kind of looked at each other and wondered, I wonder what he thinks really bad is.
For months, the Combined Task Force trained at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida.
The training was very, very precise. We trained with live ammunition each day. We would train, and the guy had to hit his mark at the appropriate time.
The raiders used a scale model of the prison compound, which was codenamed Barbara. They got to know every tree, every wall, every guard tower. But they had yet to be told exactly what their mission would be.
When we volunteered for a classified mission. In other words, we never did know where we were going to go until about 2 hours before lunchtime.
We knew, of course, that it was a hostage rescue type thing. And once we had been told we needed to plan for up to 100 hostages, POWs, that it must be in North Vietnam. Of course, we certainly didn't expect it to be in the suburbs of Hanoi. That was kind of an eye-opener, a bit of a shock.
By November 20th, 1970, every element of the plan was in place. The assault teams, codenamed Kingpin, departed from Thailand under the pale light of a quarter moon. Just enough light to see, but too little to be seen.
I don't believe any of us were really scared. The confidence was there. And of course, with the adrenaline pumping and actually going on the mission itself and all that stuff, really no time to be scared.
56 Special Forces fighters participated in the actual raid. Air Force and Navy aircraft staged diversionary attacks and sealed the area from North Vietnamese Army reinforcements.
Then there was only that small window of opportunity where that whole force had to slip through the radar undetected. Our intelligence gathering people had found out that there was a certain window when the radar was facing in a different direction and would allow us to creep through.
Okay, we're on the final heading.
When the assault teams landed, they had to be in and out in less than 30 minutes. Every element of the plan hinged on perfect execution.
Here he comes back to left. Should come up 077 right now.
This is what a professional soldier looks for. He looks for that little something extra, a little something daring, that's different from the norm, and that's what you train for. This was the ultimate. This was the epitome of my career, to do something like this.
Because of the confined space of the compound, the plan called for one of the Air Force pilots to crash land his helicopter directly into the prison courtyard to create an opening for the raiders.
And those individuals, protect them from getting hurt, they had mattresses on the floor of the helicopter. And as the helicopter hit, they would get out and secure the buildings where the prisoners were actually kept inside the prison compound itself.
Another chopper landed just outside the prison walls. Demolitions experts used explosives to blast a hole in the 7-foot-high wall. They joined the assault group already fighting its way through the compound.
Wildwood, this is Axel. We are set down on the wrong side. We're on the opposite side. Over.
One chopper pilot made a mistake. He landed Bull Simons and his 22-man support group in a nearby compound.
Hey, you set them down in the wrong place, buddy. You leave them
There, much to their surprise, Simon's group found Russian and Chinese troops who were assisting the North Vietnamese. A furious 9-minute gun battle ensued.
I dare say that we probably knew the compound as well as the guards did after all those rehearsals. So it didn't look right.
Those personnel in there were going to be, sooner or later, individuals that would be out in the fields setting up missile sites and anti-aircraft defense sites and all that stuff. So they went down there and they sort of destroyed that building as well, and the enemy that was down there.
We pulled back, disengaged from the enemy, because our mission was not there to kill Vietnamese. Our mission was to get back to the primary objective.
Red Wine, this is Axel. Pick up on a chopper coming in. He's coming in to get us now.
Inside the prison walls, the special forces killed approximately 50 guards. But as they searched all the structures and checked for possible tunnels, the truth became clear.
Negative items so far. We'll get a report shortly.
As I kept hearing reports coming in that there were negative items, which meant no POWs, it was starting to register that, hey, there's nobody in here. They're not here. And that was just kind of a, I guess more of a shock than anything. The fact that we'd gotten in there, taken out the guards, got all the rooms open, and then there was nobody there was pretty shocking.
Understand negative items. Roger out. Stand by to withdraw normally.
After 27 minutes on the ground, the Green Berets called in the choppers for the extraction. Later, intelligence sources learned that the prisoners had been moved to a new prison 12 miles closer to the city.
You know, I just want to reach out and grab that guy on the other side and say that you're going home.
What these men have done is a message that the prisoners of war have not been forgotten, and that we will continue to do everything we can to attempt to bring them back home. We can all be thankful that America has produced such magnificent men.
The Santé Raiders had made history. Even though they were unsuccessful, their mission became a textbook case for its meticulous planning and precise execution. By the time the raid on Santé took place, the war in Vietnam was grinding toward an uneasy conclusion. Troops were going home. The Special Forces, the first to arrive, were among the last to leave. Their years of struggle gave the Green Berets an enduring sense of accomplishment.
It's like a religion. You don't go to church, but you have a spiritual feeling that gives you a wholeness because you're with that team, and that team supports you, and you support that team. And we know that whatever needs to be done will be done.
There are probably some men who are alive today because they would not quit, although they were badly wounded, surrounded, and called upon to surrender because they were special forces, and that was inconceivable. They would rather die than bring any kind of embarrassment or disrepute to the Green Beret.
We made a difference. We changed lives. We helped people to survive. To the extent possible, we assisted them in their self-determination. And history will judge if, in fact, our endeavors were for naught.
President Kennedy once said that a nation reveals itself not only by the men that it produces, but by the men that it honors. The Green Berets of the Vietnam era were to eventually earn 17 Medals of Honor. It is their legacy, and that of thousands of other unsung heroes, the quiet professionals, that continues to live on.